Oh! Hello! Today I want to talk about a new movie, one of the biggest movies of all time and one of the most important movies of this generation. Re-Animator from 1985.
It is taught.
Of course he's dead. The dosage was too large.
You killed him.
No, I did not. I gave him life.
Now, Re-Animator is a film that already has quite the cult status already. It's sort of like a Rocky Horror Picture Show where a lot of people know about this movie. It's often referenced in other movies, and people that have seen it really, really love it. And I recently watched it for the first time a few months ago, and I can say that I really enjoyed this movie. I don't think I love it like a lot of people do, but this is one movie that is certainly in a league of its own.
Granted, it was an accident, but this is the freshest body that we could come across, save of killing one ourselves, and every moment that we spent talking about it cost us results. Now, will you give me a hand?
It stars Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton and is directed by Stuart Gordon, who also directed this movie that I'm watching, From Beyond, which also stars Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. But these two movies, could not be more different. From Beyond is this hyper-sexual, weirdo, gore-fest movie that basically has no plot, but it just has tons of fun visuals, tons of crazy scenes, lots of practical puppetry, and it's a fun movie. I actually like From Beyond better than Re-Animator, but Re-Animator does something that not a lot of scary movies do nowadays, in that it's a horror comedy, and it does the horror and the comedy pretty well, surprisingly well. Both aspects of the movie are balanced incredibly well to where one isn't constantly overtaking the other and vice versa. It feels like it's a part of a whole. And the comedy and the horror often go hand in hand in ways that are really surprising and pretty hilarious in this movie. There's things in this movie that would just not fly today, to put it simply, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The story of Re-Animator is pretty simple. Jeffrey Combs is a scientist who is trying to figure out how to bring the dead back to life, and not in like a zombie fashion. He wants to bring them back to life. He wants to stop the aging process, things like this. And so Bruce Abbott is our main character, and he's a student learning to become a surgeon or something like that. And so Jeffrey Combs comes in, and he starts to become a student as well in the same school as Bruce Abbott, and he immediately starts making enemies with the head professor there, one of the most respected surgeons working. He calls him out for being a plagiarist. He has no ideas. He's really simple-minded. He's this kind of guy that is just preaching exactly what he's heard his whole life, and he doesn't really veer from that at any point, whereas Jeffrey Combs is the kind of character who is trying to push the bounds of science, or science relative with this movie. And so they butt heads, obviously. They start hating each other, and then Jeffrey Combs moves in with Bruce Abbott, and from there we are introduced to the main story of this movie, in that Jeffrey Combs is trying to reanimate dead corpses. And before this point, the movie is pretty simple. Like, there's not much that is scary about it. There's not much that's really that funny. It's just a lot of establishing, where we're introducing Jeffrey Combs, we're introducing this really simple-minded professor, we're introducing Bruce Abbott, we're introducing Barbara Crampton, their relationship with the dean of the university and with the head professor, and there is a lot that the movie is working with, but it does it in a pretty concise way for the most part, because Barbara Crampton is the daughter of the dean, and Bruce Abbott is dating Barbara Crampton, and so there's a little bit of this, like, I don't know if I should date because I'm the dean's daughter, and it might look bad on you, it might show favoritism, so they're kind of exploring that, and as that's being explored, you learn that this head doctor, this head professor, has a thing for Barbara Crampton in an incredibly creepy way.
To me, my esteemed colleagues, capable, beautiful, loving daughter, the obsession of all who fall under her spell.
I think the best part of this movie is Jeffrey Combs. He is chewing the scenery. He's giving this incredibly hammy performance. Every line of dialogue he has, he's just committing to 110%.
Dangerous.
Something like this, it's not inherently funny. Decapitating someone with a shovel after they try to steal your work isn't really a funny thing, but the movie is able to balance that humor and that horror really well. There's some genuinely disturbing scenes in this. Like I said, the severed head doing things with Barbara Crampton is genuinely unnerving, and really it seared itself into my brain in a way that very few horror movies these days have been able to do. But then there's moments like this where he decapitates this professor and just says plagiarist, and it's absolutely hilarious. Or when he's snapping pencils to show how frustrated he is in a lesson with the head professor. There's stuff like this that just makes this movie a notch above most horror movies, even horror comedies at that. I mean, it's not on the level of an Evil Dead 2. I don't think anything ever will be. But this movie has its place, I think. And despite it being tightly structured and balancing horror and comedy very well, I don't really love this movie. I mean, the characters leave a lot to be desired. The main character especially is really, really bland. He is basically just a catalyst for you to see Jeffrey Combs through. And if I was making this movie, I probably would have had Jeffrey Combs be the main character, and we can watch him develop this Re-Animator formula and test it and have the wacky horror comedy stuff come about from that. But we get this incredibly bland milquetoast guy, and you don't learn a whole lot about him that's that interesting. And even Barbara Crampton, to an extent, isn't that interesting. I like her in this movie. I think she gives a good performance. I think everyone really gives solid performances, but the characters just leave a lot to be desired. And this movie's very obviously low budget, and that does hurt it at times. I think the scene when not Barbara Crampton, Jeffrey Combs reanimates Bruce Abbott's cat, that scene is particularly bad, where it's just them bashing random items in this basement while the camera kind of follows them, and this awkward light is bobbing back and forth, and it's so painfully obvious that they're just hitting random things and pretending like a cat is in the room. It's stuff like that, where it's so obviously low budget. Or when he reanimates the cat and it has like a broken back, and so it's an obvious puppet. Or when the severed head is talking near the end, and his body is holding his own head on his stomach, and it's very obviously not a body that's 3 times larger than what it was normally. So this movie has its charm. This movie has its place in the cult comedy, the cult horror world. I think this movie definitely deserves to be a cult movie. It's one that I really enjoy watching. It's just also one that you have to go in with expectations, because it's not a movie that's going to blow your mind with its visuals or its practical effects, a la The Thing. It's not a movie like The Thing, and I don't even think that this movie is trying to be The Thing. It's just that there are movies that do what this movie is doing better. And although I like it a lot, I can't say that it's one that I find myself often revisiting, and it is because the characters leave a lot to be desired, and the low-budget nature of it does hinder a lot of it. But it is fun. It is genuinely entertaining. It's a tight 90 minutes. It's really well structured, and it is really, really fun to watch every once in a while. So I'd recommend it for that. And that's all I gotta say. So I'm gonna go back to watching the better movie of the two, From Beyond. So I'll see you later.